Welcome back to the deep dive. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. The pilots flying the AH-64 Apache, they can literally just look at something and tell the helicopter's gun where to point.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible technology, especially for its time.
Right. Mind-blowing. Okay, so let's get into how that's even possible, because today we are going deep, like really deep, into the whole story of the Boeing AH-64 Apache attack helicopter.
Sounds good.
We've waded through a ton of material for you, defense reports, Wikipedia, historical stuff, trying to pull together the real core of what this aircraft is about.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot out there.
Exactly. So our mission today, uncover the most important, the most interesting bits of the Apache's journey, from the idea to the battlefield, and explain why it's such a big deal without hopefully drowning everyone in tech jargon.
Yeah, keep it understandable but informative.
Perfect. And hey, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We really appreciate you tuning in.
So where do we start? The beginning, I guess? The Apache wasn't just dreamed up overnight, right?
No, definitely not.
It actually grew out of this specific need back in the early 1970s. The U.S. Army had this thing called the Advanced Attack Helicopter Program, the AAH program.
Okay.
And that popped up right after they canceled the AH-56 Cheyenne project. They realized they needed a serious anti-armor helicopter, something way beyond the AH-1 Cobra they were using.
So a direct replacement need. What were they looking for specifically?
Well, the big things were way more firepower, better performance, better range, and critically maneuverability, especially for flying really low nap of the earth flying. That was key.
Right. Hugging the terrain.
Exactly. So they had a competition, and in '76, Hughes Helicopters Design, their Model 77, won out over Bell's entry, the YAH-63.
Okay, so Hughes got the nod, and then things moved pretty quickly.
Reasonably, yeah.
Oh.
Full production got the green light in 1982. That's a big step, committing to building them in large numbers.
Sure is.
The actual prototype, the YAH-64, had its first flight way back in September '75, but it didn't officially enter service with the Army until April 1986.
So a bit of a gap between first flight and service entry.
Yeah, testing, refinement, setting up production lines, all that takes time.
Mm.
And there's a corporate side, too. Hughes Helicopters got bought by McDonnell Douglas in '84,
Wow.
and then McDonnell Douglas merged with Boeing in '97. So the Apache has kind of had three big names behind its production over the years.
Interesting lineage. All right, so let's get into the machine itself. What makes it tick? The design, the tech, starting with that distinctive cockpit.
Right, the tandem cockpit. Pilot sits in the back seat, slightly raised, and the co-pilot gunner, or CPG, is in the front.
Why that layout?
It optimizes visibility for both, splits the workload effectively. The pilot focuses more on flying, the CPG on weapons and sensors, though they can swap roles to some extent.
Makes sense.
Then you've got the Power 2, twin turboshaft engines. Reliable, powerful, providing the grunt it needs. And the landing gear is that tailwheel type, pretty rugged. But really, the magic starts happening up front in the nose with all those sensors. That's what gives it its edge, especially for target acquisition and night fighting.
Which brings us to that helmet system, the IHTSS, Integrated Helmet and Display Sight System. That's the one that sounds like science fiction.
It really was revolutionary. IIS basically slaves the helicopter sensors and, crucially, the M230 Chain Gun to where the crew member is looking.
Just by looking.
Well, the helmet has sensors that track its movement. So the pilot or gunner looks at a target, and the system aims the gun or points the sensors in that direction. It makes target engagement much faster, much more intuitive.
Wow. And it helps with night flying too, right?
Absolutely. The pilot gets FLIR, a forward-looking infrared imagery, projected onto a small display over one eye, like a monocle almost.
Okay.
So they can see the thermal signature of the world, fly in pitch black, but still keep their other eye unaided for, overall situational awareness. It's a clever setup. The system tracks the helmet, directs the sensors and the gun.
That integration, vision, and weapons, that must have been a huge leap compared to older helicopters.
Oh, massive. Before, you were relying on fixed sights, maybe some rudimentary head-up displays, but nothing this integrated or intuitive. It's slashed reaction times.
Incredible. But it's not just the helmet doing all the work, is it? There are other sensors involved.
Correct. You've
Okay.
got the PNBS, the pilot night vision sensor. That's usually the turret above the nose. It provides that primary FLIR image for the pilot we just talked about.
Huh.
Uses a germanium lens, which is great for letting infrared energy through. And it tucks away, rotates backwards when it's not being used to protect it.
Smart. And below that?
Below that is the TADI's Target Acquisition and Designation Site. This is primarily the CPG's tool. It's for finding, identifying, and tracking targets.
And TADI's has its own bag of tricks.
Definitely. It's got two main parts. The day side has, like, a really powerful TV camera, 125x zoom, plus a regular telescope view, a laser rangefinder and designator, and a laser spot tracker.
Okay, so full daylight capability.
Right. And the night side has its own FLIR sensor, also with different magnification levels. That laser is super important. It measures the exact distance for the gun and rockets, but it also paints the target for the Hellfire missiles to home in on.
Oh, so it guides the missiles.
Exactly. And the CPG can actually use the TADI's for navigation or even as a backup night vision system if the pilot's PNVS has an issue. Like the PNVS, it also stows facing backwards. So yeah, lots of redundancy, lots of capability packed in there.
Okay, so they could see pretty much anything, day or night. What about actually engaging those targets? Let's talk weapons. The teeth of the Apache.
The main event is usually the 30mm M230 Chain Gun. It sits under the fuselage right between the front landing gear.
Chain gun.
Yeah, it refers to the mechanism. It uses an electric motor and a chain drive to cycle the action, which makes it very reliable. It can fire up to 650 rounds per minute.
Wow, what kind of rounds?
Typically, HEDP high explosive dual purpose, good against light armor, vehicles, personnel, buildings, or HEI high explosive incendiary for starting fires. It's effective out to about 2,000 meters.
And it has different firing modes.
Yep. Single shot, bursts, controlled bursts, full auto. And like we said, either crew member can aim it with their helmet using IHEs, or the CPG can use the TADs for really precise aiming. Holds up to 1,200 rounds usually.
That's a serious piece of hardware.
Yeah.
But it carries missiles and rockets too, doesn't it, on those little wings?
Exactly. The stub wings have 4 hard points. The classic loadout is AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. The primary tank killer and pods of Hydra 70, those are 2.75-inch unguided rockets.
Hellfires. Different types.
Oh, yeah. Lots of variants. One interesting one is the AGM-114N, which has a thermobaric warhead. It creates this massive pressure wave, very effective against troops in bunkers or caves or inside buildings in urban combat.
Nasty stuff. And the rockets.
The standard Hydras are unguided area effect weapons, but more recently, they've integrated APKWS, the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System.
What?
It basically adds a laser guidance kit to the Hydra 70 rocket body. Turns an unguided rocket into a precision munition, much more accurate, less collateral damage.
So, more options. What about range? Can it stay out long?
It can carry external fuel tanks on those hard points too, which really stretches its legs, gives it more time over the target area.
And air-to-air, can it defend itself against other aircraft?
It's been evaluated with missiles like Stinger, Sidewinder, even the British Starstreak, and the AGM-122 sidearm anti-radar missile. It's not standard fit for the U.S. Army, but a lot of international operators do equip their Apaches with Stingers for self-defense.
Okay.
And those pylons. You can actually rig them to carry people externally in an emergency, like extracting downed aircrew or special forces.
Versatile.
Very. It's also tested the MBDA Brimstone missile, another anti-armor weapon. And the U.S. Army is now fielding the Spike NLOS missile. NLOS means non-line of sight.
Meaning?
Meaning it can hit targets far beyond visual range using data links and potentially third-party targeting. A huge standoff capability increase.
It really is an adaptable platform. Now, all this capability, it operates in dangerous places. How well does it protect the crew? Survivability must be a big factor.
Absolutely fundamental to the design. The crew compartment, the bathtub, is armored, and the rudder blades too. They're designed to withstand hits from up to 23mm cannon rounds.
That's impressive.
Yeah, there's about 2,500 pounds over 1,100 kilos of armor plating built into the airframe in critical spots. The fuel system is self-sealing to prevent leaks and fires if it gets hit. There's even a transparent blast shield between the pilot and gunner, just in case something penetrates the cockpit.
So multiple layers of protection.
Right. And it was designed from the ground up to meet tough crashworthiness standards. MIL STD 1290. That means crash-resistant landing gear, seats that absorb impact energy, a fuel system designed not to rupture, all about giving the crew the best possible chance of walking away from a crash.
That's reassuring. Okay, so
Yeah.
we've seen how it's built, how it's armed, how it protects itself. Let's talk about where it's actually done the job. Its operational history. The U.S. obviously used it first.
Right. The first U.S. Army unit got trained up in 1986. By 87, they were already deploying to Europe, Cold War posture.
Okay.
Then the 90s saw action in the Balkans, Bosnia, Kosovo, Task Force Hawk in Kosovo in 99. That actually highlighted some initial wrinkles.
Oh, like what?
Issues with training, how effective the night vision gear was in certain conditions, fuel tank vulnerability, just general survivability concerns in that specific challenging environment.
So, learning curve.
Definitely, but they learned from it. Training improved, equipment got tweaked, those early bumps smoothed out later effectiveness.
And then came the global war on terror, Afghanistan, Iraq.
Exactly. Apaches were heavily involved in both theaters. They
Yeah.
took losses, sure, some to enemy fire, like SA-7 shoulder-fired missiles, some to accidents. But the vast majority, even those hit badly, managed to get back home.
That speaks to the survivability design.
It does. By 2011, the U.S. Apache fleet had clocked over 3 million flight hours. That's a lot of flying.
Incredible number. And the Apache itself evolved during this time, right? The AH-64E.
Right, the Echo model, originally called the AH-64D Block 3 or Guardian, big upgrades there, better digital connectivity, more powerful engines, the ability to actually control UAVs from the cockpit.
Wow, controlling drones.
Yeah, MUMT manned-unmanned teaming. Plus, new composite rotor blades for better performance. It entered service in 2011, deployed to Afghanistan starting in 2014, proved very effective.
Where else has the U.S. used them recently?
They were key in strikes against ISIS in Iraq, especially around Mosul. Sadly, there were also 2 crashes just recently, March 2024, in the U.S., still under investigation.
A long and storied service history for the U.S. What about other countries? Israel's a major operator, isn't it?
Big time. They got their first AH-64As back in 1990, later got the D models. They called the A the Peyton and the D the Seraph.
Interesting names.
Yeah. It was apparently a bit controversial at first, choosing Apache over just upgrading their Cobras, but they've used them extensively against Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, during the Intifada and later conflicts.
And they've customized theirs.
They have developed some unique upgrades, partly because there were some initial U.S. restrictions on sharing certain technologies. They also used the Spike NLOS missile we mentioned earlier.
Okay. What about the U.K.? They had their own version.
They did. The Westland AH-64 Apache, or Apache AH-1. It was basically a licensed-built AH-64D Block I, but with Rolls-Royce engines, which is interesting, and folding blades so they could operate them more easily off ships.
Folding blades, right, for naval use.
Exactly. But the AH-1s were just retired, actually, March 2024. They're being replaced now with new AH-64Es, the Guardian model.
And the Dutch.
The Netherlands operate AH-64Ds too. Got them in the late 90s, early 2000s. Theirs have a Dutch-specific self-protection system called AASI. They've deployed them quite a bit. Djibouti, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. And they're also upgrading to the E model now.
Seems like the E model is the new standard globally. What about the Middle East, besides Israel?
Saudi Arabia uses both A's and D's. They've reportedly used them along the Yemen border and in the conflict there. The UAE also operates Apaches, upgrading to the E, and they've also been involved in Yemen. Egypt has them too, uses them in the Sinai against militants.
It's really spread far and wide, beyond the Middle East too.
Oh, yeah. India is a big one. Both their Air Force and Army operate the AH-64E, and the list keeps growing. Australia, Poland, South Korea. Lots of countries are either buying them or showing strong interest. It really shows the Apache's enduring appeal as a top-tier attack helicopter.
Truly a global platform.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe dig a bit more into those different versions. You mentioned the A, D, and E.
All right, so AH-64A was the original. Then there were ideas for a B and C model, but those got canceled. The big step was the AH-64D Apache Longbow.
The longbow radar, right, that dome on top.
Exactly, but here's a key thing. Not all D models have the longbow radar. It was an option. So within a unit, you'd have some aircraft designated DWID, with interferometer, meaning with the radar, and others DWOD without.
Ah, okay. That clarifies things. I always assumed all D models had the radar.
Common misconception. If they take the radar off a DWI temporarily, you can still see this little collar structure where it mounts. And the D model also brought upgrades to the avionics bays.
The AVBs.
Yeah.
Forward avionics bays.
Yeah, those compartments on the side housing the electronics. The D model got EFF's extended forward avionics bays, bigger to hold more gear, plus better cooling systems for all that extra heat.
Makes sense. More electronics, more heat.
And then came the AH-64E, the Guardian. We touched on it. Better engines can control drones, new blades, better connectivity with things like JTRS radio systems, improved flight controls. Just a major leap across the board.
Was there ever an F model planned?
There was a concept, yeah. AH-64F. Looked at things like even more powerful engines, retractable landing gear for speed, maybe even a tail rotor that could pivot for forward thrust. But the Army decided to focus on the next generation, the Future Vertical Lift program, instead of pursuing the F.
So continuous improvement right up to the E model, which is still the workhorse.
For sure. And the plan is to keep flying the AH-64E for many years to come, even as those FVL aircraft start coming online. It's just that capable.
But operating something this complex, it can't all be smooth sailing, right? Our sources mentioned some logistical headaches.
Yeah, that's often the hidden side of advanced military tech. A GAO report, Government Accountability Office, did point out some historical issues with Apache logistics.
Like what?
Things like higher than expected failure rates for some parts, which meant more unscheduled maintenance. Also, a lot of special inspections needed for certain systems, adding to the workload.
So keeping them flying was demanding.
It could be. The report also noted that sometimes logistical support stuff, even the 30mm gun in one instance, didn't get fully tested operationally before being fielded. That could, impact readiness if the support isn't quite there when you need it.
Right. The best helicopter in the world isn't much use if it's stuck on the ground waiting for parts or maintenance.
Exactly. It highlights how crucial that whole support infrastructure is. Hopefully, lessons learned for newer programs.
Definitely something to keep in mind. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. As we start to wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways you think people should remember about the Apache?
I think the big picture is that the AH-64 Apache is really the result of decades of focused development. It's become this incredibly capable, tech-packed attack helicopter with a truly global operational footprint.
Yeah, that sensor fusion, the IATs, the TADs,
Yeah.
it really set it apart.
Absolutely. Those sensors, combined with its potent weapons loadout, make it a formidable force on the battlefield. But it's also important to remember it wasn't perfect from day one. It faced challenges, both technical and logistical, but it continuously evolved.
A story of adaptation, really.
I think so.
All right, so here's a final thought for you to chew on. We've talked about the Apache's long service life, how it keeps getting upgraded, but we also mentioned future vertical lift, the next generation stuff. Thinking about that, what do you see as the next really big leap in battlefield aviation? And maybe more importantly, how do you think all the lessons learned from the Apache's journey, the successes, the struggles, might influence what those future aircraft look like and how they're used?
That's a great question to ponder. How do you build on this legacy?
Exactly, something to think about. And hey, if you found this deep dive into the AH-64 Apache interesting or valuable, we'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button, share it with someone who might also enjoy it, and subscribe if you haven't already.
Yeah, it really helps the channel grow and lets us keep doing these deep dives into fascinating topics.
Absolutely. Your support means a lot. So thanks again for tuning in to the Deep Dive.